consistently.
Even the lenders that you have agency debt on?
No.
Okay.
So the agency debt is a different category. And with the agency debt, we negotiated lesser terms.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Now, do you guys have a feel for what that percentage change might be across the board from April to May?
I imagine that we're going to see some folks who are not working now for 4 to 6 weeks. And that's going to have a huge impact beyond just what they're receiving in terms of stimulus dollars.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're also going to see some changes in the amount of hours that even the employed residents are working. And so that's having an impact. We don't know yet how much of an impact, but we're preparing for 20% of our residents to be unable to pay their rent.
Got it. And is the process that you guys kind of, I guess, went through from the application standpoint, is that something that you were counseled to go through, or was it something that the team at Clemons put together that we might be able to potentially share with some of our brokerage clients and owners?
Yes, I will tell you, residential tenants are very different than commercial tenants because you must follow federal fair housing guidelines.
Absolutely.
And so the first phone call we made in that process was to our attorney, who handles all of our rent collection and eviction related issues,
Okay.
so that we could make sure that we were following the fair housing guidelines. And if I were to sum it up in layperson's terms, every tenant needs to be treated equally.
Mm-hmm.
And what that really means when you're deploying these strategies is if you offer a discount to one resident, you must offer a discount to all residents. And so the advice we received was come up with payment plans to repay the rent over time, and come up with an application process to verify that those payment plans are only offered if you have been impacted, income-wise by this pandemic.
Sure.
And that way you can quickly have a baseline to go back to your residents who ask for assistance. You can have a consistent response that you offer to all of them, and they can play an active role in outlining when they can repay those payment plans. So one resident might have a strategy because they're looking for a job or taking on some part-time work in the meantime. Another resident might have a strategy that they're going to deploy their stimulus dollars to repay that.
Got it.
So again, it allows us to help the residents who truly have a need, as opposed to giving a mass discount to everyone.
Right.
Now, one thing we did do for everyone in the month of April is we waived all late fees.
Okay. Yeah, that's very helpful. And, I think that one question that I've continued to get is, okay, Logan, I own a large, mid-sized to large shopping center, maybe between 15,000 and 50,000 square feet. One of my anchor tenants is a national credit tenant, and they sent me letters that said, hey, we're still open for business, but at the same time, we're just not going to pay rent. Have you been through that at all with any tenants, and how would we advise those folks?
Yeah, so the other question that's distinctly different from residents is the commercial tenants. And commercial tenants have been affected across the board. I'll give you an example. We manage a property that has about 20 small to medium-sized local and franchise tenants.
Mm-hmm.
The restaurants, for example, have been impacted very differently than, for example, the insurance agents.
Yep.
And so, again, we had an application for them to fill out. We immediately went to those lenders and asked for loan deferrals. And the majority of the lenders of our commercial properties are local banks. And the local bank said, we want you to make sure your building does not become vacant.
Right.
We'll help you to the extent we can help. We have one tenant that is a local newspaper, for example, and that tenant is being severely impacted. And immediately we told them that based on their application, we would defer the month of April's rent and add it on as an additional month at the end of their lease. It is a
Sure.
full deferral of that rent. So as long as they fulfill the rest of the lease obligation, they will not have to repay it as a loan. It is not a loan. Um, the decision we made as an organization was to deal with April's rent and not May or June or July's rent, because we don't know at this time when people will be able to get back to business
Right.
or what their business model looks like.
Hmm.
And so, although we really want to help those tenants that have been impacted, we can't defer our mortgage payments forever.
Right.
And our mortgage payments don't result in 100% of our expenses. So in the case where we've had national tenants who have said, I'm not paying, we've immediately turned over those notices to our legal counsel to help us devise a strategy that's both specific to the tenant and that tenant's contract in terms of whatever breach is necessary, and to come up with an economic model that we're comfortable with given what we know this month.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good advice. I think it's important to understand every specific case and working towards some sort of economic resolution towards that. But one thing that continues to ring true that I'm hearing is those relationships that you had with those banks. And I think it's extremely important to know that when everybody is trying to acquire property and nobody wants that recourse and they want to go to an agency lender, this is the time where it pays to have those relationships with those smaller to mid-sized community banks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, I think most of those banks have gone through, the recession, for example, where they received a lot of property back that they didn't want, that came back in, a less than perfect condition.
Hmm.
And so keeping buildings occupied is at the very front of their mind.
Yeah.
And working with the tenants to make sure that if there's a chance that the tenant can recover, which is an if at this stage, not all tenants will recover on the commercial side,
Right.
that you have a good strategy to fully leverage the tools that you can to help them recover.
Let's go ahead and shift gears a little bit into the brokerage side of things and Clemens' approach to working through acquisitions. And I want to dive into a few points here. The first being 1031 investors and people who are in a 1031 exchange right now. I have seen some guidance that is hinting at a potential extension from that date if your transaction was to identify or close between April 1st and July 15th, that you have until July 15th. But has that been, do you know if that has been solidified by the IRS at this point?
At this time, I don't know that that's been confirmed. I know there's been discussions around that topic. And we have several properties under contract on one side or the other with a 1031 exchange buyer.
Yeah.
So far, we've been lucky that the majority of those transactions, due diligence was complete, or largely, especially the on-site inspections were complete. And now we're just working through soft issues that don't require, any mobilization of physical inspections.
Yeah, let's dive into that, because that is one thing that is, we had probably, I'd say, 3 transactions on the buy side under contract when this first started, probably an equal to about $10 million worth of real estate that either pushed pause or just fell out of escrow because of that, right? Not knowing if the investor could fly to get here, not knowing if we could get inspections done, and potentially even an appraisal.
Mm-hmm. So I think that the main issue that people are faced with is, are there vendors who are working, and in what circumstances are those vendors working, and what if anything do you have to disrupt on site if they are working?
Yeah.